Let's get right to this week. Sony Open, and we've got 29 as of the time we are recording this. Patrick Reed and Victor Hovland were early withdrawals from the field, but we've still got 29 of the 42 players who competed last week at the Century Tournament of Champions who are making that 28-minute flight over to Oahu to play at Waialae this week. A completely different course. I mean, you couldn't find two more different courses. That said, I've always thought there's a major advantage for a few different reasons. First of all, the guys who played last week have 4 rounds under their belt. They have some competitive juices flowing. They're not coming off a long winter break and the holidays and everything like that. And secondly, their body clocks are used to being on Hawaiian time right now. They've already been over in the Aloha State. They've gotten used to it. Hey, look, if you want a Mai Tai or two, you want to relax on the beach. Okay, they've kind of been there, done that, and they don't have to do it when they get over to the Sony this week because they've sort of had a week over there already. So I guess right off the bat, do you look at those guys and, oh, by the way, they're usually better players who are coming over from Kapalua as well. Do you look at those guys and believe that they've got an edge this week, even though the course is such a different golf course from Kapalua?
Oh, they absolutely have an edge. It's proven in data. The guys who've played more recently, especially competitive rounds, have an advantage. And, in this particular case, I do think the Hawaiian thing matters a ton. And even with travel, we've seen, a variety of things on players having to go out to Europe. That can be a disadvantage if they played the week before in the States. There's a variety of things that you can look into with travel, and you can certainly find and make some conclusions based on data. And I think, with Hawaii, it definitely applies. I mean, obviously we're looking at the best players and it's a weird time of the season, but I'm giving it a big bump. And I think certainly there's some value on guys that played last week. And I actually, Harris English already moved in the market. I thought there's some value on him. But now that he's, 13-1, that's kind of where I think he should be priced. So we'll talk about those guys, but I absolutely think there's value in taking guys who played the previous week.
It's been done before. Justin Thompson, I believe, just a few years ago, was able to do the back-to-back Aloha swing, winning both of the Hawaii events. So certainly possible for Harris English to do it. Cameron Smith was the outlier. He was the first player in 7 years last year to win the Sony Open without having played at the Plantation course the week before. So, yeah, certainly something to that. And we start looking at some of these players. I mean, we'll get right into the sort of top tier here, and Webb Simpson at the top of the list is one of the few players that's coming over that I really don't like that much, whether it's in the betting markets. I just think that that price is too low for Webb Simpson right now, whether it's a DFS. I'd rather get a bunch of good players than one really expensive player at the top there. Coming off COVID, said he still had some symptoms last week, even though he had tested negative. So I'm going to probably fade Webb Simpson in most, if not all, formats this week. But just a little bit further down that list, Colin Morikawa, love him. Sungjae Im, love him. And Abraham Answer, my pick to win this week, my favorite outright this week, Abraham Answer. It's got to happen at some point, Pete. It's got to happen. Abraham Answer is going to win a PGA Tour event. We're not going to have to wait that much longer. And why not this week? This week seems as good as any. And we've talked about predictive stats in the past. The one stat, or one of the stats that I really like looking at, is final round ball striking numbers for a guy who's playing in back-to-back weeks. And you look at what Abraham Answer did on Sunday. He was second in the field in strokes gained tee to green, first in the field in strokes gained on approach shots. I think that should be very predictive for what we can expect for him this week.
Yeah, I certainly think he's really interesting, and this course should set up well for him. And you and I both like that. And the most recent form we have is on Sunday, so I'll take that. And he checks all the boxes, so I think that's a really good call. Agree with you on Morikawa. I think he should be probably. I actually have English ahead. I think if my order would be Webb, English, and then probably Morikawa, and then Berger and Im kind of in that same range. So I really like what I saw from Morikawa last week. His iron game was dialed. He hit the flag on a shot. So I'm interested in him, and I think this course sets up well. Yeah, Abraham Answer is certainly there. Another guy who's kind of moving in towards that tier, who played amazing all week and just didn't have his best stuff, made a double bogey on a par 3 after a really bad pull, is Ryan Palmer. who I actually think is a pretty interesting pick. He's already moving in the betting market. So, yeah, there's actually a lot of really good names at the top, given a lot of the guys that played last week wanted to stay in Hawaii.
Yeah, I can see that. I know a lot of people like Kevin Kisner as well. Kevin Kisner really not made for last week's golf course. He's made for a wildlife type golf course, and traditionally he plays well on these tighter tracks with smaller greens. So he's another guy. We sort of glossed over Sung Jae Im there. I said that I liked him. You said that you liked him, but we didn't really kind of talk about him. Really good ball striking numbers. I think there's a certain correlation to PGA National. I get that it's 6,000 miles away or whatever it is in South Florida, but Sungjae won at PGA National last year. It's a tighter track where the wind is going to blow. You've got to work your ball both ways. It's a ball striker's golf course. I think there's a definitive correlation between that one and Waialae, this week's host, where you basically got to do the same thing. I mean, the winds are a little unpredictable. Some days it might be laying down. Other days it could be blowing 20 to 25 out there. That said, if we do see some wind this week, Sungjae's dealt with it before. He's had success with it before. We kind of, like I said, glossed over and both said, okay, yeah, I like Sungjae. I really like Sungjae this week. I mean, is there a reason not to?
No. I mean, I think he's a really good pick. Depending on your price, I mean, he's under 20 to 1 would be my only concern. But there's certainly markets that I like him. And yeah, I think, like I mentioned, I think it's Webb, then I think it's Harris, and then I think it's Morikawa, and then probably Sungjae and Berger. So just all relative to the price line shop for these for sure. I think Harris is the guy out of that group that, just if we want to go back, I mean, his driving was outrageously good last week. And that's what's really important this week, is just finding fairways. So we're going to kind of go down the list. Someone like Brendan Todd, I think, makes a ton of sense this week. He's actually one of the top values, I think. You can look to someone like Brian Harmon, who drives the ball well. Ryan Palmer drove it well. So, yeah, there's a lot of guys. And then, you know what, who we haven't mentioned, who's certainly elite, who you're always beating the drum for, that I'm surprised we haven't brought up, is Joaquin Niemann, who I thought it was a little weird that it took him so long to go hit balls. He's just sitting there with Sergio chatting it up. I guess part of it was the announcers were talking about how weird it was, but well, what are your thoughts on that? How soon would you have your guy practicing, knowing that there's a playoff coming?
Depends on the player. Depends what he feels comfortable with. I saw something on social media as the broadcasters were maybe not criticizing him, but at least pointing it out while he was sitting there just eating some chips and having a sandwich and kind of hanging out. The kid's 22 years old, and it's not, if that's Tiger Woods, who is in the lead and potentially going into a playoff and has a bulky back and is 45 and needs a little time to warm up. All right, get Tiger over to the range and get him hitting some balls. When it's Joaquin Niemann, who basically goes parallel to the ground, however his back moves that way, which is ridiculous with that swing. I just don't see a problem with it. I mean, he hit a bad shot in the playoff. It wasn't a terrible shot. It actually worked out okay. And then he just couldn't get up and down from there. But
he had an amazing drive. I mean, he piped his. I was rooting for English. The only bet that I really won last week was I thought there's some value on English going into the final round. So I was sweating English, and Niemann put it by. I mean, obviously, just the bounce you get on 18 is so critical to how far it actually goes when you're set up. But hit a great drive, and what a round he played. I mean, he can get so hot with the putter. So I know you've been bullish on him. I thought that was a great showing.
Speaking of value on Harris English, is it getting close to the point where, and I get it, like the first round leader bets this week, I mean, he is second on the board. It's in one of the books I saw he was actually tied for first round leader. His Thursday scoring average, I believe in his last 12 events, is 68.25. He was tied for the first round lead with Justin Thomas last week. Is it getting to the point where you might as well, even if you're going to hedge, you might as well throw a few bucks on Harris English on Thursday just because he plays so well right out of the gate? And I've got to think that this week, at a place where he's got a handful of top 10 finishes in the past, having that kind of monkey off his back a little bit, being able to just kind of play free and loose and not have to worry about anything. Whatever happens, they're not going to take away his trophy from last week. What do you think about Harris English as a first round leader bet on Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, I'm bullish on Harris, so I don't hate it. In general, someone like English, I was always about the favorites, and first round leader bets, it's hard to find value most of the time. English's biggest advantage versus the field is playing more rounds. So that's my kind of challenge with it. But I certainly see your I get where you're going, and English is playing out of his mind right now. And I
Uh,
think talk about a place where it's probably easy to transition and just still feel good. Like Hawaii, you're just relaxed. Like he just played well. Didn't seem like much bothered him. Just kind of the way he's going about his business. Like he just seemed, stress free. And it makes a lot of sense when you're in the middle of the fairway, as much as Harris English has been. His driving has really impressed me. And that's why he's become such a good player. I mean, he's really figured out how to be a very consistent ball striker, which, that's golf, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And usually first round leader bets, I'm the guy that's digging through the weeds looking for a guy who's 150 to 1 on a Thursday that, hey, can just go out there and play as well as anybody for 18 holes before he drops off. But I just think that Harris has played so well on a Thursday that if you're playing a couple of those triple digit numbers on Thursday for the first round leader bets, you might as well just cover yourself and take Harris there as well. So let's get to the mid tier. I'm going to throw out a few names in this mid tier, just kind of going down the list. Russell Henley is a guy who's won here in the past. The rest of his record isn't great, but obviously he's played really well over the past 6 months or so. He's a guy that I usually like and like even more this week. Emiliano Grillo, if that putter ever gets even just tepid, he'll be okay. It doesn't have to get hot, just tepid. He'll be all right. Mark Leishman is a guy who's picking up a lot of steam in the marketplace this week, I believe. Sebastian Munoz, another guy who's coming over from last week. Taylor Gooch is a guy that I like on ball strikers, types of golf courses. Anybody in that range? Matthew Neesmith, I'll go down to. I'm a big Matthew Neesmith guy. When he gets it going with those irons, he's a plus iron player out there. So any of those names strike you as a guy that you like, or anybody else in that range?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of names that are really interesting there. I'm looking. One guy who's sneaky been accurate lately is Rory Sabatini. So he's the one that I'm interested in. I mentioned Todd earlier. Kisner, I think, is interesting, although the market's starting to move on him a little bit. And the Grillo call, I mean, my goodness, can he just putt better this year? I really feel for him because you can see the anxiety that he has, and he hits the ball so good. And he gets to the greens. I don't think he's like a horrendous putter. It's just got to be obviously on the stats bear out that he's a horrible putter on the PGA Tour. But the PGA Tour players, a lot of these guys are just because they're better putters. I mean, you know this as well. You played with really good amateurs, guys who are on other tours, guys who compete to stay on the tour. Like a lot of just being competitive against the best players in the world is putting well. And Grillo, just to me, when I watch him, he does have some bad shorter misses, but a lot of his putts are like grave, kind of he's missing on the high side like a pro would, and he just doesn't get enough putts to quite fall. And you can just see the frustration just boiling in him. Like he makes fun of himself all the time. It's like
I pick him and I have the same frustration. Peter, do you know that 5 years ago, Emiliano Grillo was ranked 23rd in the world at one point?
Yeah.
And he
I
is
mean, he's an
currently
elite ball
159th. He's going the complete opposite of what you're supposed to be going as a young player. I mean, we've seen it before. It's not like there's anything new, but we've seen Jordan Spieth and Brendan Todd and guys lose their games a little bit. But the weird thing with Grillo is he hasn't lost his game. He's ball striking it better than he had 5 years ago when he was 23rd in the world, and he just can't get anything in the hole.
Yeah, so frustrating, I'm sure. But yeah, I really like him. And then I want to hear your thoughts on some of the late guys. You know who I show value on right now? That I'm really excited about. It's our boy Steely.
Yes, sir.
I show a good bit of value on Steely. You can get Steely in some markets like 200 plus to 1, 225. I see a 230 out there. I mean, that's something I'm very interested in.
So I've got a little insight. I believe he was talked into playing, and he played here for the first time last year. Coulda, woulda, shoulda won on 18 in regulation. Coulda, woulda, shoulda won in the playoff against Cameron Smith, who he plays a decent amount of practice rounds with, but lost in that one. Disappointing one for Brendan Steele. But that said, he had never played that event before, and so I tried saying to him afterwards, and he's been more down about losing other events than he was last year. I said, look, you could have just stayed at home, started on the West Coast in California, and not gotten the $500,000 and the X amount of ranking points and the experience of being in the hunt and all the good things that come with at least getting into a playoff. So that was a good experience for him. I believe he told me last year that Keegan Bradley, his buddy, had talked him into playing. He said, look, this is a good course for you. You're actually going to like it. And so it turned out he really did like it. He's got his coach, Chris Mason, on the bag again this week, and he's got a very good record when Chris Mason is on the bag. Something about, even though the fact that he's got Christian Donald on the bag full time, who's a terrific caddy, one of the best out there. When Mason is on the bag, I don't know if it's more of a focus. I don't know if it's, hey, he's getting a little swing tip from his coach while he's caddying for him, but he plays very well. Mason was on the bag for this event last year as well, and I think that could bode well for him. So yes, especially, I mean, you're looking at top 10s, top 20s, but 7,100 on DraftKings, Peter.
Yeah, it's a great
Fire.
price. And dude,
Fire.
You got to work harder. I mean, his coach has got to figure it out. I mean, of course, you want to be the caddy and go down to Hawaii. I mean, seems like the pro move. I mean, you also in the caddy mix. I'm going to go on the limb and say you're not as good of a caddy as those guys, but maybe ask Brendan to do the Hawaiian tour at some point in your life.
We just talked about it recently. In fact, this is how the conversation was sparked that he's got Mason on the bag. And I said, look, I would love to go out to Hawaii with you. I know I didn't get the invitation yet. I would love to be there. I'd love to be on the bag. But quite frankly, I've got a career 68.0 scoring average as a caddy on the PGA Tour, and I'm not sure that I want to put that on the line. It's one of the best ever.
It is
one round, 68.0. It doesn't matter. It's only one round. It's in the books. Steve Williams does not have a 68.0 scoring average lifetime caddying on the PGA Tour. Bones does not have 68.0. You show me how many other people in the world have a 68.0 scoring average caddying on the PGA Tour. And so I'd love to be out there for him. I just don't want to risk that number. I mean, I think we could throw up a couple 64s, 65s. I think I could probably lower it a little bit, but again, risking a lot for me to go out there. I got through all that with a straight face, Pete.
No, it's great. I mean, like you said, can't risk the 68. I hear you. What a life though down in Hawaii. One last guy I'll throw out, and I definitely want to build I have my 5 questions for you actually.
Yeah. And I got a couple other guys late too.
Yeah, my favorite. There's a couple guys that are normal in this range. I think JT Poston's really interesting. I'm interested in Brian Stewart as well.
Okay. I don't mind either of those. I'm going to throw a couple names out at you. Just because we're talking about players from last week. Michael Thompson is a guy that last week he might have done something. What's that?
I like him and JT Poston. Like basically, I think those guys are very similar. And
two others for you, and one's sort of a off the cuff long shot. But Henrik Norlander has played well in the past. T9 at this event last year. He missed the cut in his last 3 events last year. But with that winter break and, so much time in between, it doesn't bother me as much as if he was coming in with, straight off that last week. So Norlander's a guy I like. And then the former world #1 amateur who just won on the Japan tour about 2 months ago, a month after turning pro, Takumi Kanaya. The kid is, I believe, 22 years old, 21, 22 years old. He's 5'8", 165. This is not Bryson. This is not DJ going out there being able to hammer it around big ballparks. But at Waialae, where you got to keep it in play, and it's all about ball striking, he's a tremendous ball striker by all accounts. Takumi Kanaya, look, I wouldn't mortgage the house on him going out there winning this golf tournament outright, but top 20s, DFS play, top 30s, I kind of like that play this week.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's someone I don't know much about, and I think that's a really sharp call. Just in terms of the background, and this is the right course. Like you mentioned, I really think there's advantage to these just like fairway finder guys, and that's what I'm waiting, and it's certainly shown up year after year, and we'll see. I mean, even some other guys that we didn't mention, kind of near the top, like. You have to look, Brendan Todd, like I mentioned, Kisner we talked about, Palmer, Harmon, basically everyone that's popping. Russell Henley started to pop a little bit. They're more of these accuracy type players. So anyone who has that comp, I think is interesting. On the flip side, when we get to our DFS lineup, I think everyone knows the accuracy guys are good. So can you go the other direction with the long bombers for lower ownership?
What was disappointing? I looked at it this week, and I went and looked at the entry list after it was finalized on last Friday afternoon, and a few of my go-to guys, the guys that I really like when it's a tight ball strikers kind of golf course, Where's Doc Redman? Not here this week. Where's
Yeah.
Dylan Fratelli? Not here this week. I mean, there are a few guys I had earmarked that I said, man, I could really see that guy going out to Hawaii and winning this golf tournament. And they're not playing it. There were a whole bunch of guys that I looked at and said, hey, this is a guy who, based on his numbers, based on his stats, based on his style of play, could play really well at Waialae. Go check against the entry list, and nope, they're not there. So I guess they can't win it.
Yeah, well, Doc Redman, this is a perfect course. I don't know why he's got to get out here in the future. Hopefully,
I don't know how Doc Redman is going to win 40 events this year if he doesn't even play the first one.
yeah, come on, Doc, get out.
I mean, I'm set
Doc
the bar a little high, but not that much.
Perfect. Well, hopefully Doc Redman is out there again, and yeah, it's gonna be fun. I mean, this is the first like big event where I'm excited to be betting a bunch of stuff, and DFS should be great. Last week was fun. Course is beautiful, but these full fields, there's way more edge.